Welcome to Newshour. One of the most high-profile cases in recent memory has returned to the spotlight. Harvey Weinstein, once a commanding force in the global film industry, is facing a retrial in New York nearly 5 years after his conviction became a turning point for the hashtag MeToo movement. That original verdict was later overturned, opening the door to new proceedings and new allegations. Well, this latest trial revisits some familiar ground, but introduces new testimony, a fresh courtroom strategy, and renewed public scrutiny. At the centre of this case, the same questions remain. Questions of power and abuse, safety and consent, and the long shadow of silence in Hollywood. Well, we begin with this report on how the trial opened and what is at stake.
Harvey Weinstein's retrial on rape and sexual assault charges got underway on Wednesday, April 23rd, as a prosecutor and a defence lawyer offered starkly contrasting explanations for the disgraced movie mogul's encounters with women who hoped to make it big in Hollywood. Prosecutor Shannon Lucy told jurors in a New York state court in Manhattan that Weinstein exploited his status as a Hollywood gatekeeper and power broker to prey upon and sexually abuse women, then assured their silence by holding their careers hostage. Prosecutors have portrayed Weinstein as a serial predator who promised career advancement in Hollywood to women, only to then coax them into hotel rooms and private apartments where he overpowered and attacked them. Weinstein's lawyer, Arthur Aidala, rejected that characterization, saying the Oscar-winning producer had mutually beneficial relationships with his accusers, who ended up with auditions and other show business opportunities. Weinstein, 73, dressed in a dark suit and navy tie, listened after being brought into the courtroom in a wheelchair. He has pleaded not guilty to 2 counts of first-degree criminal sexual act and 1 count of third-degree rape and could face decades in prison if convicted. Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg was in attendance as the retrial began. Weinstein is being retried 1 year after New York's highest court overturned his 2020 rape and sexual assault conviction and 23-year prison sentence, citing errors by the trial judge. The conviction had been a milestone for the hashtag MeToo movement, which encouraged women to come forward with allegations of sexual misconduct by powerful men. More than 100 women, including famous actresses, have accused Weinstein of misconduct. He has denied assaulting anyone or having non-consensual sex. In ordering a retrial, the State Court of Appeals last April said Weinstein's first trial had been unfair because the judge let women testify that Weinstein assaulted them, even though their accusations were not the basis for criminal charges. Lucy said one such woman is Kaja Sokola from Poland, who claims Weinstein assaulted her when she was a 16-year-old aspiring actress. Even if he is acquitted, Weinstein will likely spend the rest of his life in prison because he was convicted of sex crimes in California and was sentenced to a 16-year term. Weinstein has had several health scares while being held in New York City's Rikers Island jail, and in September was rushed to a hospital for emergency heart surgery. Citing his health, Weinstein's lawyers are seeking a court order to let him stay overnight at Bellevue Hospital in Manhattan for the duration of the trial.
Okay, let's cross now to New York and speak with our correspondent there, Mitch McCann. Mitch, good to see you. Mitch, what's been happening then? What's the reaction been inside and outside the courtroom to the prosecutor's claim that Weinstein had all the power?
Well, good afternoon from New York. The reaction from Weinstein's lawyers, firstly, to the claim that he had all the power is essentially to argue that Weinstein did not use any of that power to commit sex crimes on the alleged victims. In fact, Harvey Weinstein's legal team argues that the prosecution arguments are really undercut by the fact that Weinstein had relationships with these accusers, these women, after the incidents were alleged to have taken place. In fact, at one point, the lawyer for Harvey Weinstein, Arthur Aidala, Retrial said that Weinstein had lunch with the accuser Jessica Mann and her mother after she claims that Harvey Weinstein had sexually assaulted her. The suggestion there from Idala is that how could anyone have lunch with their mother alongside someone who had just assaulted them, inferring that this could not have happened. Now, this trial is expected to last up to 6 weeks. It's a retrial, as you mentioned, of Harvey Weinstein's first trial, which took place in 2020, where he was convicted on 2 counts and sentenced to around 23 years in prison. This was overturned last year when that New York appeals court ruled that a number of women who gave evidence in that first trial should not have been allowed to do so because they actually weren't complainants on the case and they weren't involved in the actual charges. This is going to be a very interesting case to see how these arguments on both sides play out.
And Mitch, with respect to the new allegations, particularly those involving Kaya Sokola, how are they shaping the public and media perception of the retrial?
Well, look, the first thing I would say to that, and this might be unsurprising, is that the public perception of Harvey Weinstein is already very, very negative. When his conviction was overturned last year, there certainly weren't many people celebrating that, publicly at least, so his reputation publicly is still very much scorched, and we have to remember he was also convicted on separate sex crimes in Los Angeles as well. That's why I think much of the public probably find another accuser added to this case almost unsurprising, given Weinstein has been accused of such widespread abuse across the United States. This additional charge comes from the former model Kaya Sokola, who claims that Harvey Weinstein forced her to perform a sexual act on him, but she has also accused him in a civil lawsuit of groping her a number of years ago. So there were 2 cases from that first trial that we're hearing from, but there's this additional case as well. So 3 cases against Harvey Weinstein in this trial.
And Mitch, has there been much visible support or protest from advocacy groups like the MeToo movement outside the courts during this phase of the proceedings?
Yeah, look, I haven't seen any evidence of any large protests this time around, but it's something we certainly saw during the course of the first trial back in 2020. PBS here in the US reported that during the first Weinstein trial, there were chants outside of people chanting the word rapist, but not this time. And there may be a couple of reasons for this. One is that while these issues are still incredibly important, they are not at the top of the news agenda like they were in 2020. And another is something that I just pointed out earlier, is that many people have already made their minds up about Harvey Weinstein, regardless of what happens in this trial. To many people, he has already been convicted twice in separate states and is a rapist in their eyes. And this was something still yet to be proven last time around. It was then proven in the courts. So we haven't seen any large protests, but that is something that may change depending on what evidence and what arguments we hear in the coming weeks in New York.
Thank you, Mitch. Mitch McCann there for us in New York. Okay, let's delve deeper into this story and its implications and go to Washington, D.C. to speak to Peter Roth, editor at Newsweek. Peter, very nice to see you as always. Very difficult this for Hollywood, the Hollywood community. What response has Hollywood given so far to this retrial?
They're not talking, and it's not surprising. This is a complicated issue that hasn't really been dealt with. The whole Me Too movement that it spawned. Harvey Weinstein is a pig, and I worry, frankly, that he can't get a fair trial in his retrial because he's already guilty in the minds of so many. There have been documentaries about what he did, magazine articles about what he did, people have given speeches about what he did, what he is accused of doing, and I'm not sure that he enters the courtroom protected by the presumption of innocence, which is at the core of the American legal system. But the other piece here is that the Me Too movement was just as much about Donald Trump about radical leftists uncomfortable with their perception of how Trump behaved toward women, treated women, thought about women, used and abused women for his own power and pleasure. And Weinstein and the Me Too movement are part of that reaction. Well, Trump's president again, and that movement on the fringe has moved on to other issues. You know, they're now complaining about people who are in the United States illegally being arrested by immigrations and custom enforcement, put on airplanes, and being sent to places like El Salvador, and how they're being denied due process. That's the thing that everybody's talking about now as the example of Trump's excess. And the Me Too stuff has just been swept away.
It's very interesting, Peter, you talk about the political dimension to this. I mean, there are, as you say, people who believe he is guilty of criminal acts. Then there are people who believe he's not a criminal, but just a thoroughly unpleasant individual. Either way, surely, even if he's found innocent after this retrial, surely any form of salvaging a reputation is going to be close to impossible.
Oh, he's done. As a filmmaker, he's finished. I mean, his guilt in the court of public opinion, which is probably more important in a lot of ways, is a settled issue. And so, you know, there's he's been convicted of stuff in California, and he's going to be in prison, and you know, he's in ill health, and you know, even if he does survive prison and get out, I don't think there's a second act for him.
I mean, that's a good point, Peter. Sorry to interject, but I just think it's 73 years of age, 16-year sentence. I mean, it's for all intents and purposes a life sentence, right?
Yeah, and even if they're compassionate on him because of his age and his health, certainly more compassion than he showed to any of the women that he victimized. And they let him out. Nobody's going to want to make a movie with this man. You know, nobody's going to treat him like the new sheriff that he used to present himself as being, you know, running the town. You know, Hollywood is a small town, and you know, Harvey Weinstein's movies got awards and made money, so he had a lot of power. And because that's what people care about. You know, what can you do for me? How much money can you make? How can you make me a star? You know, the cliches in the movies have truth. But you know, there's a lot too of the conversation that was never explored, and I don't think will be explored, because you know, we've never really addressed what enabled Harvey Weinstein to get away with what he did for so long. And I don't just mean that there's a culture of silence that covers for powerful men and women in the entertainment industry who take advantage of people, but also we didn't talk about the people who understand that that's and I'm not condoning it, but who understand that that's the way the game is played and are willing participants. You know, if that's what I have to do to get a role in a Harvey Weinstein movie, which might get me an Academy Award nomination, I'll do it. No big deal. And how does that affect the culture in the entertainment industry, in business, in politics, that not everybody is a victim, that people are sometimes complicit in the quid pro quo. And you can argue that no such system should exist, and I would be one of those people. But that it does exist, that if you go along with the system cheerfully, willingly, happily, because you want the benefits that you can earn on your end, what role do you play in keeping the system alive? What role do you play in...
Peter, sorry to interrupt. It's a very interesting point you made, though. Yes. I was going to ask you about this because you make a very good point, but nevertheless, it is typically men who have been in charge for a very long time. Have those men, do you think, really been properly held to account for managing and promoting, if you like, that structure which allows that abuse to take place?
I think that is a rabbit trail, frankly. I don't think that you can say, well, it's predominantly men, because I don't know that we know that, particularly in a place where there are efforts to aggressively promote diversity, to push people into positions of power and authority over others because of their gender, because of their race, because of their sexual preference. I can't say with any confidence that there aren't women predators out there, gay predators out there, people who are doing the same things at a similar level that Harvey Weinstein has been convicted in court of doing, or are doing the same things that he stands accused. And that too is, in my mind, part of the problem with the Me Too conversation, is that it is all about what men are doing to women and not about what people in positions of authority are doing to those who have no power or authority. And again, this was very much metaphorically about Donald Trump and how Trump was viewed. You will no doubt remember the comment caught on an open mic where he made references to grabbing women in places that one does not grab a woman, as though it were an everyday occurrence. And that infuriated people. And and rightfully so. It was an offensive thing to say. I mean, even if it was, private guy on guy, locker room talk and guys talking the way that they do when there aren't other people around. It was an offensive thing to say. Shouldn't have been said. Certainly shouldn't be presented as truthful. And there was a lot of outrage about, and particularly most of America expected that Hillary Clinton was going to win the election in 2016, and America was finally going to have its first woman president after it had its first black president. And there was this transformation underway that involved the destruction of the traditional white male patriarchy. And Trump comes roaring back and wins the election and the Electoral College, and all of these people who had these expectations smashed were lashing out. and they lashed out at Trump, and then the Me Too stuff happened, and they lashed out again at men. And I'm just not sure at all that it's not a problem with the way Hollywood operates. And
well, let's look.
If you're a student of Hollywood, as I am, this system has been in place since silent films.
But yeah, I mean,
there have been.
Let's look up to date. Let's bring it up to date, though, Peter, and look at for example, the Me Too movement that was, as you say, during the first trial, very strong, very prominent. Has that movement faded, do you think, or is it simply evolved into a mainstream point of view?
I'm sorry, I'm having a little trouble hearing you.
No, that's fine.
Just
the Me Too movement that you spoke about earlier, that had such prominence during the first trial, has that faded, do you think, recently, or has it simply just evolved and become a mainstream point of view?
I don't know that it's become mainstream, but I do think that it's faded. It's evolved. I think people are more careful about what they do. I think they're more careful about what they say, because nobody wants to be the next Me Too example. And for all I know, I've said something in this interview that makes me the next Me Too example. Nobody wants to be that person. But it's also true that the outrage machine that gave so much attention to Me Too has moved on, and they're now covering the members of the U.S. Congress who were flying down to El Salvador to meet with the person who was allegedly inappropriately deported to El Salvador from Maryland, and this idea that the Trump Department of Homeland Security has people out rounding up people at random on the street without warrant, without due process, and are simply putting them on planes and flying them out of this country, and the resulting judicial battles. And is the Trump administration complying with federal judges, and do they need to comply with the federal judges, and what are the that's what's feeding the outrage machine right now, and that's what everybody's talking about. They're not talking about predatory producers taking advantage of ambitious starlets.
I think one of the points of argument that has been articulated broadly on the left of politics has been this argument that sometimes the right are very keen in cases of criminality to say, let's not be coy about who has committed the crime. Let's be open and truthful about that. And any sense in which that's sort of skated over is seen as something that is less truthful, is some sort of political maneuver. I suppose they would also say that if men are committing most of these crimes, then we should be able to say that they're committed by men. Not that that's the only dimension to this, of course not, but you're not saying that it's not okay to focus on the fact that it's men that produce the majority of these awful situations.
I'm not saying it's. I'm not saying it's okay not to talk about men who abuse women or may abuse other men, or who may abuse children, as some former child stars have alleged. What I'm saying is you can't overlook the fact that there may be women who are doing it too, that you cannot overlook the fact that this kind of abuse is wrong no matter who perpetrates it. And that was alluded to a little bit in the Me Too conversation And then I felt, at least, that part of the conversation was quickly extinguished.
Okay. Well, Peter, let's just finally, let's just talk. Sorry. Let's just talk about.
You're saying this isn't about men abusing women. This is about people in power abusing the powerless.
Yes. No, that's your point's well made and very clear.
And we have to keep that. We have to keep that in mind.
Let's talk about celebrity culture. I mean, it is as dominant, if not more dominant now than it's ever been over the last 10 or 20 years. Social media amplifies everything. To what extent is that causing, or is that contributing to this power dynamic, this problem, this unhealthy, as you put it, exchange system that is set up in Hollywood?
Well, first of all, Hollywood runs on fame, so it feeds it. But here's the bigger story. Social media gives power to the powerless, to the people who perceive they have no power. It gives them a voice. It lets them know they're not alone. You know, whatever experience I have, I can post on social media and I'll find 100 other people who've had the same experience, and pretty soon we have an online movement. And if we can get the attention of the authority media, of the elite media, hey, we're in business. And so what the social media aspects of this did really was to fuel the outrage machine. It fed the appetite of the daily appetite of the beast that needed something to talk about. It was like the OJ trial. It was like the Cosby case in more ways than one, because it's something that people would tune in to watch, which, as you and I both know, in the media business these days means money in the pockets of the people that own the media organizations.
Yeah, very interesting indeed. Peter, thank you very much indeed for all those points and your analysis, as always. Thank you very much indeed. As Harvey Weinstein's retrial unfolds then, the courtroom becomes more than just a legal battleground. It's a stage for a cultural reckoning. The outcome may not only determine the fate of one man, but also test the strength of a movement that challenged decades of silence. From Manhattan to Hollywood, the world is watching again. From everyone here at A News, goodbye for now.